Dune Awakening is actually pretty good. First thing up was character creation, and the first thing I do when trying out a game for YouTube is to attempt to make an attractive character. It's crazy easy with this game, the presets are fantastic and so are the detail options, allowing you to change quite a lot. There are a few redundant settings however, but overall pretty great. I quite like the tattoo options. Full collar tats are a risky endeavour, they don't suit everyone, but when they do it's pretty peak. After finalising and naming, Grandma Tyrell asks you about your homeworld, your social class and your combat class. I went with Flowery Musical Cultured World, Nobility and Swordmaster, after which Mrs Tyrell went full Dom and took it just a little far.
Don't pull away or you will die.
We're given a sneaky mission to find the Fremen. They're those people from the movie. Cue epic space shot. No, we've been hit!
I agree, but she is almost Sayadina.
Phew, we're interesting enough to not be killed. Oof, I'm hurt. Yay, I'm fine! How the hell did this membrane get here, covering the only way in and out of this place in the time it took me to wake up? Delicious moist shrubbery. Ah, there's that dude who both put my life in danger then saved it. I bet he'll tell me he did both of those things and not build a partnership on lies or anything.
A portable rocket, I surmise, based on the damage. No doubt the work of some desperate and dangerous outlaw. One with a burning hatred for the Emperor and all he represents. I am Xantara. My companion is Noctua.
Oh, I bet that bird's your biggest fan.
If you can slip back onto the Proteus and locate the command module, you can activate the captain's personal emergency transmitter.
Sweet, we have our first mission. We'll procure a mining laser, learn about access-controlled force field to allow for convenient level design.
The captain's room is blocked by a pentashield. You'll need a pentashield key to pass through. See if there's another way forward.
Combat right away is pretty basic, but in a solid way, attack and block. We can also parry to stagger. Shielded enemies require a slow attack, which requires staggering first. Water really is going to be a big deal in this game, especially in the beginning. Here's our noble, we have our way out of here.
We only need the leader.
Holy crap, this guy's hardcore. Hells yeah, any second now the cutscene will end and I'll have my first boss fight. Okay, I mean it was pretty cool, but my boss fight. The visuals are pretty epic though, as is the music.
There's too many! Turn us into the storm! They won't follow. Hang on! We're going down!
Get up, Off-Worlder. I couldn't wait for you. But now you need to run. The sandworm is coming. Run! Now!
Seriously, this guy. Now he's just leaving, didn't even slap us awake, even though he knows the sandworm is coming. Don't fall for it, Zaynita. The bad boys are never worth it. One thing I'm super curious about is, can those worms digest all that metal? And what about the sand? I should probably read the book. Time to craft ourselves some more appropriate clothing. This is not remotely flattering. Ooh, a building. I think this is someone's base. Time to wander aimlessly in the desert for a bit. Do a little mining, slice some magic membranes, get used to the combat, and loot a few containers. The tutorial questline that had us make this rag clothing is a pretty solid one. It has many quests, most of which are very simple, but work well to guide you through the many aspects of the game. It is rather long, but really it's a good thing for a game like this. It's long because it doesn't cram multiple things into each other. The first part was to craft a full set of clothing. The clothing is the most base level, looks awful, protects you barely, but it costs very little to make, and shows you that you craft all your armour in this game. The second quest is to salvage enough metal to create an improvised mauler pistol. This is an incredibly weak weapon that takes a full mag or several headshots to down an enemy, but as before it shows you to also craft your weapons. Not just craft either, but research the blueprints using intel. Intel is basically a currency you gather as you play that is used to research plans of all kinds. On top of that, there are unique plans purchasable from vendors or earned from quests. I also found one in a chest. After leaving the cave, it didn't take long to find another player's base and a small scavenger camp near it with an enemy and more loot. I did what I do best and started gathering and hoarding whatever I found that could be looted, somewhat ignoring the quests on my screen. Oh, copper? Why, that is a metal, and things can be made out of metals. I should completely fill my inventory with nothing but this. I also found something tall, so gave the climb, realising before I got to the top that I'll fall if I run out of stamina. I ran out of stamina. Fall damage is pretty light in this game, but it will probably kill you if you're high enough. I also, even at the point of this recording, have no idea how to climb down from things, so did a lot of risky parkour. After a while I remembered that quests are a thing, and so researched and crafted the pistol. Without an enemy to try it on close by, I did the next part, which was to craft a respawn beacon. This item essentially sets a spawn point, so a useful bit of tech. You can only have one active at a time. I found out later that upon death you can choose between the beacon, your base, and the closest point of interest or so, potentially more depending on the circumstance. After creating and setting that, the bad boy slid back into my DMs.
This used to be Fremen territory, but the War of Assassins and the Sardaukar pogrom put an end to that. Now the sector is crawling with scavengers, fighting over the scraps of Imperium technology left in the wake of this so-called noble war. But that's to your advantage, Offworlder. Allow them to do the hard work of gathering the salvage, and then take it from them. Don't hesitate to kill them all.
On my way to the scavenger camp I spotted across the dunes, I stepped onto open sand for the first time. Walking on open sand will make your presence known to the sandworms. You'll have a vibration meter on your screen, the waveform showing the amount of vibrations you are creating and the colour showing how alert the worm is of you. The closer the worm is, the more likely it is to spot you from the same level of vibration. This is definitely something to keep an eye on, as if you get swallowed up by a sandworm, you are getting your infantry back, and that includes money, though money can be secured in a bank. Anyway, I tried the gun out. I tried it once more. I never tried it again. Back to the quests, crafted some binoculars. Never even tried them out. Grabbed a new skill, never tried it. I'm quite a professional game tester and journalist, I'll have you know. The other ability, however, was pretty awesome, and I used it constantly. Basically a dash that ends with my knee in the enemy's face. Fantastic for melee builds such as myself, for quickly dealing with trash mobs when multiple are about, as the weakest folk were one-shotted by this. After looting a particularly loot-filled scavenger base, I was instructed to build a base. Me being an absolute rebel ignored this for a while and wandered the desert some more. At this point I was really starting to wonder where the schnell I was going to get a hold of water. I've seen the movies so I know how the Fremen do it, but figured it would be something I bought from vendors, or maybe we can tap underground reserves or something. For the moment I'll continue to suck on moist shrubbery. During the wandering I happened upon a large building, so made my way over, hoping it would be full of friendlies. Just outside I found a garage with a few vehicles. Couldn't use them though. Yet. Turns out the building is a trade post. Upon further investigation I found a terminal for accepting and completing contracts. The loot-filled scavenger base not only had a unique schematic, but also a contract for delivering granite, of which I had an inventory full, so I handed that in for some quick cash and experience. Found a vendor.
Stop. I know the face of every sand-sucking bandit, scavenger and merc from here to Harko.
A proper classic RPG vendor with an accent and colourful language. It's not an RPG or D&D campaign without a memorable vendor. He also did sell water, however it was incredibly expensive at 100 Solaris per 100 ml. Can't say for sure, but I think a full thirst bar is a litre, so 1000 Solaris for having your bar full is a bit much. I also found out later, when I couldn't find the 200 ml I purchased the backup, that you drink it there and then. It's a literal cup of water you drink at the vendor automatically. So this is not the way we sort our water issues. After buying a unique schematic, I checked with the last NPC I could talk to, and he's a bit of a knob. He was, however, just outstanding at doing an impression of those old kung fu movies.
Look at the way you stand. No discipline, no confidence. I've killed 1,000 like you on the battlefield.
Essentially, this dude says he got drugged before a major battle and so slept through it, and to return his honour, these people who drugged him must die. The thing that got my attention was a reward. Not just 2,000 Solaris, but a nice chunk of XP and the Trooper skill tree unlock. Basically another set of skills to obtain. So I accepted. During this, he switched from his impression to doing a near-perfect ventriloquism act. Sans puppet.
My thirst for vengeance has been slaked by 1,000 flasks of cheap beer.
It was super impressive. I couldn't see his lips move at all. Right, time to build that base. After scampering down the cliffs until I could find a place to call home, I went on to build a base a Bob would be proud of.
Have fun with it.
During this process, I definitely learned how not to build in this game. The building is fairly straightforward, but it has some limitations I personally think shouldn't exist, such as not being able to build a wall where part of the bottom would phase into rock, even though the foundation piece did. It's possible that only the central bottom anchor point spot needs to not phase, and so the side would, but it's still a touch limiting. I'm hopeful they'll touch this stuff up a bit, but overall the building is pretty solid. Simple enough to not have to invest much time into, but complex enough to have some fun with the layouts. With my Bob box built,
have fun with it.
I powered it,
and don't forget to suck it.
I powered it up and got a mini Bad Boy DM's info dump.
You've done well licking flowers and sucking sap, but you need a consistent source of water. And the best source out here is blood.
Ah. So we do get water from corpses. Good lord. At this point I was about to start dying of thirst, and without the examination kit made or some corpses to suck on, I desperately searched for shrubbery. Good, found one. It would seem most people were smart enough to build a base right by one. Most people. With the corpse draining equipment made, it was time to look for some future corpses. This system isn't as bad as it may seem. You drain the blood from downed enemies provided you have both the examination kit and some room in a blood pack, each of which can hold 3 litres. A single corpse gives 1 litre of blood. You can then drop that blood off in a blood purification machine at your base, which will turn into water over time. From that machine you can either drink directly or extract water into a litre-jon to take with you as you adventure. These unfortunate targets doing seemingly nothing wrong existed purely for my dietary needs. Almost dying again, it was moist shrubbery time. Walking across the open sand is legitimately uncomfortable. They've done a surprisingly good job with it. I don't think the danger is actually all that great about getting eaten if you just run, but the rumbling and sand clouds from the worms mixed with the pulsing red wave meter really keep you on edge. Back at my base I researched and built the blood purifier. This purifier has a water extraction efficiency and a blood filtration rate, showing us that you get 200 ml of usable water per corpse, as each corpse gives a litre. The rate is a ml of blood processed per second. I'm also assuming we can get access to better purified tech in the future to save on time extracting from as many corpses. After building it, I got a spice-filled fever dream. It was super reminiscent of Mass Effect visions. This dream points me to complete a trial. But first I need to get fully lubricated with this delicious corpse water. I started my journey toward the first trial, which wasn't too far. I charted my path based on rocky areas using the shortest distance to cross the open sand. The first big one had a bit of a close call. Fortunately, the sandworm was busy doing his little howl at the moon routine and missed me. I found a sizable scavenger base along the way, which I, of course, pilfered for loot and that precious sanguine moisture. The trial was located in an ancient cave, which awoke the pedant in me thinking how basically all the caves here are going to be ancient. Inside I found a convenient and well-displayed bowl of spice, which I immediately snorted. Fortunately, I was supposed to do that. Another fever dream began, which tested the very limits of my 3090. In the game's defense, I set everything to ultra settings, and the lighting in this area is just insane compared to others thanks to these frickin' eyes. The whole dream was essentially a menial puzzle with bits of story throughout. It was understandable, but filled with Fremony words that I should probably read the book to understand. After the trial, the chaotic neutral guide to our adventure pushed me toward crafting a stillsuit, which definitely interested me as it would get me out of these rags and hopefully provide some help toward water mitigation. On the way back, our base I'd cleared on the way was fully respawned, so it seems respawn timers are pretty decent. I had the resources back at my base to build everything already. Upon returning, I researched and built a fabricator and got to building my stillsuit. Crafting in this game is pretty solid. Whether crafting in your inventory or with a fabricator, you can queue up items and carry on doing other things. After equipping my new stillsuit, the bad boy got in touch with his increasingly inappropriate comments.
You'll be drinking your own liquefied feces.
The stillsuit is, however, a great bit of tech. Not only does it help to mitigate water loss, but also stores wastewater. I assume it processes this to some degree, and we aren't just drinking straight urine. The suit in this function acts like a litre-john, allowing us to use that water whenever we want. It stays in the armour when it's unequipped in the inventory also. It was now time to build a survey device that would open up this section of the map. For that I needed to build an ore refinery, so I could finally process all that copper I gathered. With some copper ingots I could build the survey device and a probe to fire. All I needed now was to climb somewhere high to shoot it. I have no idea what specifically constitutes as high for this, but a tall rock spire seemed appropriate. The climbing in this game is fairly solid. If your organs are adequately lubed, you have extra stamina, and so can climb higher without having to stop on ledges and such. On top, I just pointed up and fired, and it seemed to do the trick. Now my map is open. Instead of working out how to climb down, I just parkoured it as usual. It was at this point that the game actually directed me toward the trade post I'd found before. It was nice enough to tell me I'd be picking up a contract to deliver copper ore, so I could just collect it beforehand. Ore-rich clumps of rock are everywhere in this game, so even when there are a lot of players, I doubt it'll be hard to come by. The contract in question was different to the other, in that this was one in a contract chain, and it even mentions that the chain will reward a unique tool at the end of it. This specific part of it just gives some experience in Solaris. The next part of the starting questline wanted me to buy a litre-john plan I bought before, so instead of buying it again, I went back to my base to move it from my storage to my inventory and back, which felt a touch tedious. Primarily as it was right back to the trade post for the next bit, to pick up the continuation of the contract, which was all about scavenging from a crashed ship, so it was off across the dunes on the longest trip so far. Using the former tactic of dashing across the open sand using the shortest distance from rocky area to rocky area, it didn't take too long, except for 1 or 2 stops at scavenger outposts. Arriving at the ship, I thought I'd be meeting a scavenging crew, and walked up to one of the NPCs who saw me but didn't attack. After a few seconds of being directly in front of him, he decided he wasn't a fan of me and called his friends over to steal my fluids. I managed to survive and made my way inside, where I got cocky and had my first death. It was here that I saw we do get checkpoints of sorts, as I had the option of my respawn point, my home base, or the checkpoint right by the crashed ship, which saved me a lot of willpower. I took my revenge and grabbed my stuff, finding out just how much you drop on death, and so how much other players could steal if they were about. Definitely use those banks and home storage. For the rest of the ship, I tried a bit of stealth, and it actually worked pretty well. Suited my current weapon, which was still the scrap metal dagger we made right at the beginning. This level also allowed me to admire the level design, primarily in aesthetics. Dune Awakening is a legitimately good looking game. The fidelity is top notch, and the level and mini dungeons all have some great detail. Other than the caves, there aren't really many reused environments, or at least it's not shoved in your face. Take into consideration that I have also only seen a small portion of the game so far, but the environments were fresh, especially considering the whole game is on a barren, near lifeless world of sand. It didn't take long to finish searching this wreck and return to the surface, to then realise I'd missed the one quest item I was there to retrieve and go back through the whole dang thing. Instead of going straight back, I decided that as I was far from home and actually near the 3 targets I needed to unlock the trooper skill tree, I went after those. The first was in a Fremen cave and was just a bit tougher than normal mobs, though he did have some dash move, so may have had some fancy moves I avoided by ganking him sharpish. The second was in another cave a little ways away. This one was even less of a threat. Number 3, however, was also in a cave. Yeah, most people here live in caves. This one had a few buddies though, so it was totally different. On the way back, I decided to just book it, not stopping off at camps and squirreling away my time. The open sands were terrifying with all this loot and gear in my pockets. I even experimented a little with sneaking versus walking and running, but they all seemed to cause the same vibration levels, so I just ran. Finally got home and dropped off some of the 15 litres of blood I'd collected, because psychos be psychoing, hydrated and went to handing my contract. Up near the trade post, I spotted a distant sandworm singing the song of its people. The contract handing led to the third in the chain, which wanted a few Fremen materials, which I fortunately had spares of on my person. Fourth contract from this fella pointed to an abandoned government outpost, which like the wrecked ship had a tutorial mission to go alongside. But first I had to craft some things, specifically a new set of armour, a knife and a new type of gun, a rifle. Before going to my base to do that, I handed in my contract kills for the ventriloquist Gavori, who was still practicing his act as I handed in.
Oh, they took me to a bar, got me drunk on spice beer and plied me with samuta. When the battle started, I could barely walk.
It turned out this absolute scumbag had not in fact been drugged by these people, but had just got drunk with them, though as the person who killed them for him, I can't really complain too much about his morals. Life is really cheap on Arrakis, it would seem. At my base I made a silly mistake and crafted a second full stillsuit set. Fortunately I collected far too many crafting materials and it didn't pose a problem. I then crafted a fancy knife I'd picked up the schematic for, but still had to craft the worst knife for the quest, made the new rifle and the new full set of armour. The new armour set had way better protection, but no Leiter-John capabilities, so I stuck with a stillsuit chest piece for the moment. As I picked up some fancy spice-infused copper, I could also make the fancy plans I'd picked up, which included the Leiter-John, allowing me to carry an extra 1.5 litres with me, which was a pretty big bonus. After crafting all of that, it unlocked the next of the tutorial missions, which involved going to the same testing facility the contract wants me to visit. The testing area turned out to be the best designed place yet, an underground government bunker abandoned long ago with cool technology and even lots of plants that were apparently being tested down there for potential flora that can survive on Arrakis. Our mission here was to both pick up a poisoned snooper for the contractor and the parts for a Sandbike for us. Yes, there are vehicles in this game. The testing facility wasn't far from home, so after a light jog back, I got to crafting my new vehicle with the fabricator. The bike, which required a welding torch to construct, was a touch janky in building and riding, but this is a beta, so not everything is perfect just yet. The overall riding in use, however, is surprisingly fun, and will make those longer journeys far less tedious as time goes on. I don't mind the occasional run across the dunes, but when it's a kilometre run for every little thing, it would have gotten a touch annoying. I popped back up to the trading post to hand in the contract and found another contract for an item I'd picked up in the testing facility, which was a nice quick hand-in. The final contract in the scavenging chain turned out to be for some Sandbike treads, so I just crafted a few extra and handed them in, receiving a few parts I couldn't build myself yet, the booster and storage attachments for my bike. I of course picked the booster. I took the bike out onto the dunes for a spin, hoping to bait a sandworm, but it didn't happen. Though I did find a cool base by someone that I could actually enter. You can set permissions on your base items. This includes doors, machines, storages, etc. This person just set their door to everyone while keeping the rest to just them, allowing me to tour it a bit. It was not quite the Bob box I'd made.
Have fun with it.
This is where my little adventure came to an end. It was a pretty solid experience. I haven't played enough to give a confident rating yet, but I found it cool and interesting in the beginning. It got a little boring with the combat midway, and then toward the end as I unlocked new weapons and abilities, it picked up again. I really enjoyed the rifle, which unfortunately I don't have the footage of, but unlike the pistol, the rifle felt like its shots were hefty, and if I scored headshots, which were very doable and at good ranges, it one or two shotted the enemies, so a solid damage level. Overall, crafting, building and even combat seemed like a good level of simplicity. Simplicity is important in these aspects. Take Elden Ring for example. The simplicity of the system is what makes it amazing. Every level you get a single attribute point. There are a hell of a lot of different weapons and armour, but the system itself is simple. Dune Awakening has a fair bit more complexity, but it's still good, especially for recent MMOs and survival games. Though I'd love it if they added a search box for your blueprints. Thanks all, I tried something very new for me with this video, a completely different style, so I'd love to hear your opinions, good or bad. Are you excited for this new survival MMO? Peace.